So much of the stuff I wanted to talk about was covered by Jan in his containerized mount utilities improvements. Uh, I don't want to design I don't have any design solutions for the problem. I just wanted to share some feedback from our experience with some deployments of Kubernetes that we have for on-prem data centers with us being the storage vendor. So we have a FlexVault driver. We use this as an unattachable thing. So we just support mount on mount. We don't even support attach because clustered attach is, we haven't got it that stable yet. Not just Kubernetes part, but the driver part. And so we ran into a couple of issues related to installation. Some customers asked us, like, I'm the Kubernetes admin, so I should decide what I want to go in my cluster, and I can run them as pods. FlexVault installation recommendations are that you should deploy a daemon set which copies the binaries on the host, and that's how you deploy it on every node. That makes it like a Kubernetes admin operation running a pod. But then we ran into some platforms where you can't overwrite the file system through container activity, Atomic and CentOS. And so we had to go and change our messaging to say, no, this is a admin operation. The guy who prepares the VM images, he should put in the FlexVault driver. And then if you want to install a new one, you have to like bump the node because it was the FlexVault drivers were baked in for these platforms. And so the other thing was for people who are supporting FlexVault driver and a dynamic provisioner at the same time, configuration management becomes an issue. Kubernetes native configuration management is using config maps and environment variables and things like that. But then propagating to those things which you can very well configure dynamic provisioners very nicely. But then when you want to share that config with the FlexVault driver, any private configuration, you have to like have two sets of files or copy stuff, and that becomes a mess and hard to manage from a Kubernetes cluster admin's perspective. So we have workarounds where what we do is the daemon set that we have also shares that config map and tries to see if the file configuration on the host and the config map, are they the same, and there's periodic sync and things like that. It works. We've cobbled things together, but it's not how it should be. So I was going to bring up this, I wanted to bring up this problem to say, what can we do to just get the FlexVault driver off of the host? And ideas that Jan had about running mount utilities in a container, I was headed in the same direction. And could we run FlexVault, the binary, the driver, in a container? And the standard socket mechanism might be used. So I came in with this problem thinking that we would talk about a solution. Yeah.
Taher, just a question. How does, so you're talking about the fact that, you had to maintain sort of configuration information in Kubernetes,
yes.
The storage class setup, and then also like separately for the FlexVault binary.
Yeah.
And like, there's the potential for those two to get out of sync.
Yes.
How does moving FlexVault to a container solve that problem?
So FlexVault moving, once it is in a container, I can express it as a pod, and I can just have the same one single source of truth, which is the Kubernetes config map that might be created, right? So, I've learned a lot in the last 1.5 days about what we think about CSI, what we think about internal volume plugins. So rather than brainstorming about like what solutions might be things, running FlexVault as a container is an option we can consider. But I wanted to know how serious Kubernetes support is for FlexVault today, for people who are like maybe like shipping stuff today, and how much development time will be assigned, or could we bring in resources to accelerate any kind of FlexVault fixes or improvements while the CSI work is going on? Or is our blanket statement saying any problem in FlexVault will be fixed in CSI and we have to just live through it? So I'd like to know opinions or discussion around that.
So I think that's a decision that we're going to make as a community. It's become very clear in the last few quarters that there are folks using flex volume drivers in production. What that indicates is that we can't treat it as an alpha feature. We can't arbitrarily deprecate it, and we're going to have to provide the same level of guarantee that we do for the Kubernetes API for flex volume. That means we're going to have to maintain the existing status quo at least for some time. The second part of your question is about improvements, and I guess that leads to adding additional features. So let's talk about bug fixes and improvements first. Bug fixes, I think, make perfect sense. Improvements, low-hanging fruit that we can add to improve deployments, things like that, I think absolutely we should invest in. The next big question is going to be increasing the surface space, expanding the surface space to encompass things like snapshots or other future APIs that we consider. And that, I think we should delay those decisions until that becomes a reality. We don't have to make those decisions yet. We can look at the facts on the ground at that point and use that to figure that out.
Okay. So you're saying the FlexVol API needs a lot more thought to rev than the implementation details and deployment details. Like when you say snapshots, it changes the FlexVol
the API. Exactly, right. So I would like to keep the API static for now. And then if there is some reason to consider expanding it, then let's discuss it and talk about it at that point and figure out if it makes sense or not. But we definitely need to maintain stability, make sure we have end-to-end tests, we don't cause regressions, basically keep the existing API stable.
And what version is that API? I mean, is it alpha, beta?
This was the weird thing about Flex is that it was introduced as alpha. There was the API itself was not versioned, and it never really truly officially came out of alpha. But everybody started using it, and for all intents and purposes, it is we have folks using Flex in production, so we have to treat it as a stable API. I think concretely what this means is promoting its official designation to stable, adding end-to-end tests to the interface itself, and making sure we don't introduce any regressions, and if there are bugs that creep up, making sure that we address them. And Chakri is on the line. I don't know if he has anything to add.
Yeah, that's actually this Chakri. So that is the status quo for now. So we're trying to keep the API stable, and whoever is reaching me if any sort of issues, we are very quick to address them as of now. And I think many people are using it in production, but I don't know any of the main lingering issues. If they have, feel free to bring it up and we'll be very quick to address them. As far as it goes about extensibility, I think right now we have decided we're going to keep it frozen and follow the CSI and add anything which we want to do on the CSI side. Mike, please.
So with the only question I would ask is, with the snapshot code being merged into Incubator now, do we have an alignment in terms of timelines for CSI versus FlexVol?
No, I think it's going to start off with the entry volume plugins first, and even not 100% of the entry volume plugins will probably have it. I'm guessing 1 or 2 of them will, and then we'll slowly expand the surface. If it comes time to expand it into the out of tree volume plugins, we'll just take it at a case-by-case basis and see if it makes sense.
Yeah, so I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into what we had just done recently, because we just finished up, a flex volume driver, and we have sort of the same issues that you're calling out here. But let me preface this by saying that it's not a general solution. So it's not something that would go into Kubernetes and solve everybody's problem, but it solved our problem. So that the way we treated it is that we treated the Flex volume driver as dumb and simple as possible. So all it does when it receives commands that are part of the Flex volume interface, it proxies those off to a pod that's running as a daemon set. And then in that pod, you have full access to Kubernetes API, the config maps, all that stuff. So the Flex driver itself has almost no logic in it, and then all the logic is done by that pod, which has access to the cluster resources.
Sure. Yeah. So this goes like 99% of the way towards my fantasy goal of don't touch the host. I think the wish list item comes that if kubelet shipped with this dummy Flex thing that you have, which is just the redirector, we could take that one, generalize it, and ship it with kubelet so that it could run.
I would like to add one more thing on that one is today, I think in Kubernetes, as we are, right, it's a broader Kubernetes question because even the networking, you need access to the host. Actually, that even requires an argument change to the kubelet as far as I know. So I think admins have to still handhold it. I think I have seen a proposal where CNI, they're planning to introduce gRPC hooks. So I think by the time CSI will be ready, I think even CNI will move to gRPC, then our dream will become true. But till that point of the time, I think, cluster admins are left out with this task.
And this is a bit unsolicited, but since you're got an adapter for a commercial offering, I'd add like a platform vendor perspective here. Like for OpenShift, we're going to want all the vendors to eventually use CSI. Yeah. And so, and we're going to start wanting to discourage them from using Flex volume. And so I just offer that to factor in for your long-term planning.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective as a storage vendor, I would jump on CSI the moment I saw a check-in or something and help it accelerate. If you're saying that FlexVol is not where the vision is, then spending time on FlexVol is not an investment for us as well.
But I think it's good to capture all this so we don't continue to make the same mistakes as we implement CSI either. I don't think we just dismiss this as, well, we're not going to use that. I still think it's good to document this and things you ran into and suggestions for future implementations. It's still useful.
And I have one more thing here. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so FlexVol does come with does have some support for detach lately, and we don't find much of the documentation around it. So Chakri, if you can probably put in some notes around this, or if somebody can point us to an existing material that how to work around with the detacher along with the FlexVol, they're going to be great.
Actually, the README is already updated. I think that there is only one bug which I know. I'm going to fix that one. So other than that, the README is actually fairly updated. If you have any questions, again, I can take your comments and try to improve the README documentation. But README is completely updated with all the new calls and the options added.
All right, excellent, Chakri. Thank you.
Okay.
So options for storage companies that are going down this path. Steve actually mentioned something like this a couple times. Saad, I think you mentioned it yesterday. So I talked about Go CSI, right? And the idea there is to make it easy to develop a plugin. What's possible though, and what we're releasing in the next release of Rexray is that any CSI plugin that's created using that native CSI gRPC bindings, essentially, you can stick a Docker volume driver endpoint on top of. You could likely stick a Flex endpoint on top of, and then it's also native CSI already. So using like the CSI model, the CSI spec, and if you build plugins by way of like Go CSI, you could actually kill all those birds with one stone. So engineering effort-wise, instead of focusing on Docker today and Flex and also thinking about CSI, you could also help collaborate in the Go CSI project, and then all of a sudden bring in Flex along the way and just be ready for CSI when it comes in. Okay. So it's an idea for us to work together on that project to solve this issue, I think. Be able to focus.
So because the Kubernetes integration of Go CSI is still not there, right? So we have to give it an identity. either in
I'm
tree,
not
flex,
explaining
or
it well, I guess,
Okay.
right? So Go CSI is a framework essentially that allows you to easily build a plugin, right? So you've got gRPC endpoints, which are defined by way of the CSI specification, right? You're going to basically create a plugin which makes yourself CSI compatible.
CSI compatible.
There's a shim for a Flex adapter, possibly,
Yeah.
right? That would just go use the CSI plugin that you created, right? There's a shim for the Docker volume driver, right? That would use that same Go CSI thing you created. So you're focusing your efforts on the CSI initiative,
CSI, even
but then we're
before
just
it
building
gets-
up this little shim so that along the way during the transition period, you have the same core code, but you're exposing your plugin to Docker, Kubernetes, Mesos, everyone at the same time. And then when Flex is deprecated, if it is, then all of a sudden you already have your CSI plugin that just is natively exposed to Kubernetes.
And you have one thing to maintain.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So, if you guys want to collaborate with us on that, love to have
sure.
it. I think it's a good idea.
So I'd also like to know in the storage SIG who's most sensitive to FlexWall and its changes, just to have targeted discussions and stuff. I know Chakri is
Chakri is the author.
yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you can bring it up in storage SIG anytime. We're all happy to jump on this. I think it's part of the API that this group is responsible for. So technically, we're all responsible for it.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had for the FlexWall thing.